Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the redneck. You bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to get you to do it too. And as a reminder, as we always do on this program, when we talking about going green, we don't mean mere environmentalism. We're talking about something deeper, a recognition of the interconnectedness of all of life. And whether you come at that from a deeply ecofeminist spiritual perspective, or you take that position of hard empirical Western science, or like me, you say those are both perfectly valid ways of understanding the world. I'm here to tell you, we are all connected in this web of life, and whatever we do to that web of life, we are ultimately doing to ourselves. And y'all, let's just be honest, we doing it wrong. We are literally destroying the planet that we depend upon for Earth, for life itself. And as if that's not bad enough, we are creating racist, sexist, and class oppressive system with the plunder and pillage of Mother Earth. And with that friendly note, let's bring on our old pal, Shane Knight. Shane, how you doing, brother?
I don't know about friendly note, but yeah. Hey, how you doing, David? It's good to see you, man.
Man, it's good to see you too, brother. I'll tell you, right now I'm coming at you from Amherst, Massachusetts. I am at the University of Massachusetts at the International Association for the Study of the Commons. There are 500 people or more here from across Mother Earth, from Africa, Asia, South America, North America, and there are academics, there are practitioners, there are policymakers. And I got to say, as horrific as everything is, I'm actually feeling hopeful because I see so many people with their shoulder to the wheel trying to create a different world than we're in. And I'm going to say language around the commons, remembering and returning to the pre-enclosure, pre-colonial world that all humans used to live in and which we deserve today.
Well, that sounds fantastic. It's funny that you're there because I was just there myself last week. It's like we're ships passing in the night.
I'll wave to you next time I'm at the airport. Looky here. We've got a great show this evening. But before we do, I hope that our dear friend Mel Figueroa from Tracking the Crisis was able to get to you a video. And while Shane tees it up, I want to remind folks that this is a short, just about 3-minute video that Mel creates just exclusively for our program, but there is a weekly, I call it a news aggregator that Mel Figueroa and the Democracy Collaborative put together. I love this tagline, Shane. They read the news so we don't have to, right? And it's literally, they track the horrors of the Trump administration, and then they track, here is both the movement response, the legal response, the media response. So there's a deep dive. You can go to tracking-the-crisis.org and sign up like I do. And in the meantime, Shane, let's see what Mel put together for us.
Welcome to this week's Tracking the Crisis, a weekly news roundup of Trump administration actions and movement responses. On Wednesday, June 11th, the Trump administration began to withdraw diplomats and other U.S. personnel in the Middle East due to a heightened security environment in anticipation of a rumored Israeli strike. Earlier in the day, Trump admitted that talks over Iran's nuclear program were deadlocked and that he was less confident that a deal to stop uranium enrichment could be reached. Late Thursday night, residents of Tehran began hearing explosions around the capital city as Israel launched its first airstrikes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed that nuclear enrichment facilities were targeted, although Iranians released pictures showing several residential buildings had been hit. Israel's attack was denounced by leaders across the Middle East, Russia, and Japan, while European leaders called for de-escalation. Protesters rallied in Tehran early Friday, calling for retaliation against Israel. One resident told AFP that, "We can't let this bastard continue or we'll end up like Gaza." Over the weekend, Iran launched retaliatory strikes at Israel that destroyed several buildings in Tel Aviv and Haifa. Anti-ICE protests in solidarity with Los Angeles spread nationwide to at least 37 cities this week as protesters took the streets in solidarity with LA residents and confronted ICE in their own neighborhoods. Earlier in the week, rapid response protests were called in Detroit, San Francisco, Chicago, Savannah, Baltimore, Tampa, Austin, Dallas, New York City, Denver, Philadelphia, Boston, Des Moines, and more. Immigrant workers at construction sites around the country flew Mexican flags in solidarity with Los Angeles, where the Mexican flag has become an icon for immigrant rights. Immigration courts were shut down by protesters in Sacramento, San Francisco, Concord, and Chicago, while community confrontations with ICE in New York, Spokane, Omaha, and Tucson prevented arrests in some places. Pollster G. Elliott Morris and the Harvard Crowd Counting Consortium released data this week showing that protest numbers are surging to levels far beyond those protesting during Trump's first term. With 6 to 8 million people turning out for the No Kings protests this weekend, that number has dramatically spiked and will hopefully continue. That's it for this week's Tracking the Crisis. Read more by signing up for our weekly news roundup in your email every Friday at trackingthecrisis.org. Back to you, David and Shane.
Man, Mel Figueroa does a good job, doesn't she, Shane?
She does. I really appreciate it. And it's, the video is a great summation of what she puts together. And I'm glad you pointed out that they do the giving people what to do, tracking where to go with everything. I would encourage everybody to go sign up for that because it's important to know, it's one thing to understand what's going on. It's an entirely different thing to know what you can do to get involved and try to make a fucking change around this world.
I'll tell you, Shane,
So, yeah.
I always reminded, we don't shy away I don't shy away from being both a green and a red. But Karl Marx famously said, philosophers have spent a lot of time understanding the world, but the point is to change it, right? And so I appreciate that. And look at here, that was pretty serious business. But I'm just petty enough. I hope you've got that video that you and I talked about before we got on here queued up, because if so, would you please run that for me? I know I'm petty.
Let me see if I can find it here. It may not be on this browser window.
While Shane does that, y'all, I'm just going to say what we are queuing up, I hope, as the No Kings protest, literally hundreds of thousands of folks from across the country. As y'all probably know, it looks pretty clear. We'll get a real journalist to confirm this, but I reckon that this is the single largest individual day of protest that this country has ever seen. There was another event happening in D.C. Are we ready with this, Shane?
We are ready for it.
Check out while hundreds of people were parading. This is what happened in D.C. Turn up that volume if you can, Shane. So folks who are listening on audio, what is happening is one single sad tank is coming through at Donald Trump's protest. And I don't reckon you can hear it on here, but look up the link, and it's so quiet you can literally hear the tank tracks squeaking. And poor little old Donald Trump is just as sad as he could possibly be. And like I said, Jane, I know I'm petty, but it just made my little heart happy to actually see that. I got a kick out of it.
Yeah. It's too bad I couldn't get the audio really turning up there, because the squeaky wheel of the tank was very indicative of the entire event. Now, it's still a very serious fucking thing. We haven't had one of those since 1991, right? Where they were commemorating the end of the Gulf War. I felt bad for the military personnel that were involved with this shenanigan, because they had them dressed up in colonial military outfits. Every war that this country's been in since the Revolutionary War, the soldiers dressed up in those uniforms. Some of that shit's really hot. And it wasn't
Shane,
cool in DC that day.
I want to remind viewers and listeners of Redneck Gone Green that you are a former military man yourself. You were Special Forces in the Marines, so you have a special look. I'm going to ask you, I've seen that there was a Foxtrot Tango Delta like that many of the marches were so out of precision that some commentators were saying this was a middle finger to Trump. that you can make us do this, but you can't make us do it well. What's your
Yeah.
read on that?
I mean, to be fair, I couldn't stomach watching the whole thing. Plus, I was driving while it was going on. That's how much I cared about it. But when I went back and watched the footage, yeah, it was embarrassing. There were a lot of missteps, out of step, and the sludging of the feet through the street. I was like, yeah, these motherfuckers. It was a 4 mile long parade, and nobody wanted to be there.
Well,
There might
I
have
don't know
been a
if you,
few. There might have been a few, but the video clip that we just watched, there appeared, and I could be wrong. I'm going to go back and take a closer look at it later, but it appeared like they had positioned a dummy in the front of the tank because nobody wanted to sit in the fucking hole. It's hot as fuck.
well, listen, I want to say before we move on, Patricia, who is a frequent viewer and or listener of Redneck Gone Green, wrote in that said, I heard that an attendee admitted that the whole parade was, quote, kind of lame, which gives me a chuckle. And before we jump in, I want to remind you folks that here at Redneck Gone Green, this is a non-corporately filtered news information analysis. We do encourage you, like we make everything free here, but we do ask you to join our Substack at Redneck Gone Green or join the Democracy at Work family of programs. And with that, it is my extreme honor to bring forward Sonali Kolhatkar. Sonali is a journalist of just an incredible resume. I'm going to do it quick. I first came across Sonali as a radio journalist with Rising Up with Sonali on KPFA. She is a former editor, I think, for racial justice at the Yes magazine, which sadly has folded. And I just saw that she has launched her own multimedia program called Rising Up with Sonali, an essay that she wrote on being not an independent journalist, but an interdependent journalist just touched me. And I want to admit, I also consider Sonali a personal friend. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the program, Sonali.
Hi, David, Shane. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining.
There is a lot to do and a lot to talk about, Sonali. You wrote an incredible piece on La Migra that I want to talk about, but I'm going to just literally turn it over to you because I know you live in Los Angeles. You have deep roots in Los Angeles. Tell us from your experience on the ground. Tell us. Oh, and Mel Figueroa is giving you a little love in the chat. So, Sonali, talk to us.
Yeah.
Tell us about the LA.
You're right. I've lived here for more than 25 years. I actually started my year out dealing with the Eaton fires because I live 2 blocks south of Altadena, 1.5 blocks actually. The fires came within 2 blocks of where I live. It was a terrible start to the year. And I guess I'll preface this conversation by saying that one of the things that jumped out at me after the fires was what happened immediately after the fires. Our city mobilized, our communities mobilized. And in particular, the mobilization was led by the Pasadena Job Center, which is run by the National Day Labor Organizing Network. They've had this job center, a safe space for day laborers to get work and to connect them with people who want to hire them. For many, many years. And Endelon mobilized its workers, people who had lost their jobs because their employers' houses burned down, and they cleaned up the streets of Pasadena. They volunteered en masse. They trained hundreds of volunteers. They brought their trucks and they basically did the city a massive favor, mobilizing much faster than the city was able to mobilize to clean our streets because we thought the winds were going to pick up. We were worried about more fires. They came and cleaned up my backyard. And it was just incredible. So I went and I interviewed Pablo Alvarado of Endelon, and they told us right away that they were most worried about what was coming because the fire started January 7th. They were mobilizing. They were doing Know Your Rights trainings. They were worried about the coming storm that would face immigrants. And of course, that's exactly what happened months into it. And Trump has been, having ICE agents go out and round people up. But the escalation really, truly began in early June, first in San Diego and then June 6th in Los Angeles, when there were raids at a Home Depot in Paramount. in LA County and in the Garment District, and then have continued to escalate. And LA wasn't having it. And people in LA just mobilized in a very unique fashion that, to those of us who've been covering LA movements, was not at all a surprise. Remember, this was home of the 2006 incredible, unprecedented, record-breaking immigration marches, when something like 1 million people showed up on the streets of downtown Los Angeles demanding comprehensive immigration reform, demanding a path to citizenship. I remember I was pregnant with my first child at the time, rushing through crowds in LA trying to do interviews. This was also home of the largest women's march in 2017. And we showed up, and I've been covering those marches both in Los Angeles and in Pasadena. A very unique thing in Pasadena was that last Saturday, so like a week from this past Saturday, people got wind that ICE agents were staying at a local hotel in Pasadena. And they were upset, not just in general because of the ICE raids, but because they were told that ICE would not, apparently city officials were told, and I found this from a city councilman, they were told that ICE would not show up in Pasadena and Altadena in fire-affected areas. They showed up just to stay in the hotels.
Well, hold on, Sonali. As a journalist, I want to make sure, because I know you do your homework and you check sources. Did I just hear you say that Trump administration officials told elected municipal officials in Los Angeles that they would not be sending ICE into the areas that they did, in fact, send ICE people to? Did I hear you say that?
In specifically fire-affected areas, right? So LA is very spread out, and the parts of LA that were affected by the fires were Altadena and Pacific Palisades and parts of North Pasadena. And so supposedly, according to my conversation with a sitting member of the city councilman, ICE agents were not going to be impacted areas. We're not going to be entering fire impacted areas. Now, they have been everywhere else in Southern California. And look, people who were displaced from Altadena have gone outside of Altadena. People who were displaced from the Pacific Palisades have had to move outside of that community, right? So all of LA is, in a way, an impacted area.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so we gathered outside the hotel. People were chanting, they were marching, and then there became this sort of side thing that's been happening, where people have been finding out where ICE agents are staying in hotels in Monrovia and in Alhambra, and kind of chasing them around and having these small all-night vigils. And it hasn't gotten as much attention because the big curfew area in downtown LA has gotten more attention. So yes, I've been in downtown LA. I've been covering the marches. They've been incredible. People are upset and they're really defiant. Downtown LA is covered in graffiti. Every government building, we're talking mostly government buildings here, absolutely covered in inflammatory graffiti. Everything from abolish police to F ICE to some things, that are even worse, sort of like promising violence against ICE agents. Although there hasn't actually been any violence aimed at human beings, there's been a tiny bit of property destruction, and I think unjustifiable outrage that's been expressed on the walls of federal buildings. And also, in a typically LA fashion, I witnessed immigrant labor being hired to clean those walls. Because LA runs on immigrant. I mean, we are such an immigrant-rich, heavy neighborhood. So in typical LA fashion, there were Mexican flags flying everywhere. People were making jokes about ICE in their horchata. There were, vendors selling their classic bacon-wrapped hot dogs at marches. You had folklorico dancers, you had the Aztec dancers. And so that also showed up at the No Kings rally.
So before you do, I want to give you a chance to shift into the No Kings rally, but I want to take this opportunity to really underscore something, y'all. Property destruction is not violence as a matter of definition. Like, violence has to happen against a living sentient being or another human being or a living creature. As much as individuals might think that smashing a window or or property destruction is a bad move. We can debate that, but I am not on this program. We are not falling for the liberal bullshit of a good protester versus a bad protester. Property destruction is not violence, period, full stop. Property, as I like, you don't like my music, which is a cool name, says property destruction is called vandalism. It's not violence. I apologize for the interruption.
No, it's fine. And that's such an important point to make, because we have, there is a tendency on the liberal end of the spectrum to demand a politics of respectability when it comes to protesting, and we absolutely need to reject that, right? Just as we've seen this idea that when it comes to, for example, police abolition, we get this a lot where those victims of police brutality have to be perfect, pure beings in order to deserve to live and thrive, or else they somehow deserve what they're being dealt, and needing to reject that logic. In the same way, protests and this demand that protests be peaceful is a trap. It's an absolute trap, because all it will take is either one person refusing to follow these ridiculous rules, or a provocateur, or for that matter, just equating, people rejecting the equation of property destruction with harmful things done to humans, for the whole thing to fall apart. And then what are we supposed to say? Then our entire protest is therefore not worthy, not valid, because there was some graffiti on walls. So no, and people in Los Angeles completely rejected that. I saw like 10 or 12-year-old children masked, spray painting F-ice on the you guys aren't on radio, right? You're not public. It's not public radio.
We're not public radio. You
can. But it was spray painting F-ice on the walls and on sidewalks. And there was this one powerful, just incredible scene of a 7-8-year-old child standing in front of the Los Angeles Federal Building, 300 North Los Angeles, a dozen California National Guardsmen flanking the front of this building. The building covered in graffiti, people blaring music with loudspeakers, showing the finger to the National Guardsmen, chanting, yelling at the National Guardsmen, and this one 7 or 8-year-old child standing there with nothing but shorts on and fuck ice sharpied on his chest, staring out at the crowd with his back to the National Guardsmen. I took the picture. I'm not publishing it because it's a minor, but it was such a powerful expression for me. This child's face indicated that he had nothing to lose. I'm sure hopefully his parents were nearby, but to me, I don't see this as something negative. I see this as a powerful expression of rage, justifiable rage. So the LA protests have been, and this was before the No Kings rally.
Right.
This was last week. And it has been kind of incredible. People are, of course, all they see in the headlines is, oh, there was violence, rubber bullets, people burned a car, etc. But the vast majority of it is just people expressing their rage in very creative ways, getting in the face of the cops, not touching them, and yet, of course, being kettled and arrested and shoved and beaten. And yeah, it is quite incredible. LA is basically saying no business as usual. And, if we can learn from, say, I don't know, the French or Latin America, protest is meant to be, I think Mel said it, protest is meant to be disruptive. It's meant to life, normal life, untenable, because what's the point otherwise? If it's meant to be polite, it's not going to have an impact. If you want to have an impact, have an impact.
Right. And I want to lift up Jasmine. Jasmine Banks writes in to say, I'm always curious about this liberalism tendency to demand people to, quote, politely, end quote, demand the boot to be removed from their neck, right? Like there is something, and again, I'm not punching left, and I'm not trying to be more radical than now, but I do think that we need to be really clear that the liberal, like, let's just make minor adjustments to a system that is thoroughly corrupt, a system that is literally premised upon exploitation, extraction, oppression. Like we cannot like we need to restructure this system. And I think that the whole point is to remember Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., one of the great architects of nonviolence, not pacifism, but nonviolence is the recognition that a quote riot is the language of the unheard.
Right.
Like, or John F. Kennedy, who famously said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable." The reality is all of this has to be put at the foot of not only MAGA and the fascist tendency in the Republican Party, but the liberal, weak-kneed leadership of the Democratic Party, who are literally creating the conditions from which fascism is emerging. So I have to get that off my chest.
That's fine. Yeah, I agree. And I'm realizing as we were speaking, I should mention one really important thing that made it a small blip in the mainstream media, but the thing that really got LA riled up was the arrest of David Huerta. David Huerta, SEIU leader, who basically was standing up for and trying to defend a person who was being rounded up by an ICE agent and got violently tackled to the ground, his head smashed into the sidewalk, had to be hospitalized, and then was arrested and kept in custody for several days. I mean, ICE agents who are supposed to not be touching anyone other than an undocumented person, if that, basically arresting a citizen, a known leader of the union movement. And he's being charged now, federally charged with interfering with federal agents. And when David Huerta was imprisoned, all the unions came out. This was huge. LA is a union town. And so there was a massive, massive rally the Monday after his arrest in downtown LA, where tens of thousands of people, basically the number kind of rivaling those who showed up at the No Kings rally, showed up in Grand Park in downtown Los Angeles. And they were basically calling for, to free David Huerta. And they were union members in their t-shirts, matching t-shirts, declaring and proclaiming which union they were in. That was a huge impetus. It was a fight that ICE didn't realize it had picked, that set off a series of events that now there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. So this all led up to the No Kings rally on Saturday.
Well, you really went you in my head, Sonali, because you literally, like, you took us from the LA, like, I'm just going to call it an uprising, a series of them, to the No Kings Day. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to contextualize it and then tell us what you were seeing on the streets in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so the No Kings rally was obviously organized months ago, and it was a nice coincidence that people upset about the ICE rounding up and deportations had a pre-organized outlet to show up on Saturday, June 14th around the country, but also in LA. Now, I don't know what the exact goal or agenda or even, of the organizers of that rally were specifically, other than to say, we don't want a president who thinks he's a king. Regardless, what ended up happening on the ground in Los Angeles, and I can specifically speak to that because that's where I was it was another ICE raid. It was another protest against ICE raids. It was another themed protest specifically to aimed at ICE raids, but that was just perfectly in line with the No Kings approach. That president who is democratically elected has no business essentially deploying Gestapo / brown shirts into communities at his whim to rile up people and to rip apart communities. And by the way, it should also be mentioned that Trump has made very clear, as has Kristi Noem, I think the mainstream media is missing this point a little bit. He has made so openly clear that the ICE raids are a political tool meant to disrupt Democrats. He just
hold on. This is the thing, because again, I'm no Democratic Party apologist for sure, but we need to tell the truth, the full truth here. I want you to say that last part again, because this is really important. The
And
level.
I'll quote him. I'll go you
Please.
want further. I'll quote him. I screen grabbed his Truth Social post, believe it was today or yesterday, where he said that, he basically posts things on Truth Social, and in his mind, it's now law. And so he said, officers are here. I'm trying to read this without laughing. Officers are here ordered by notice of this truth, in all caps, to do all in their power to achieve the very important goal of delivering the single largest mass deportation program in history. In order to achieve this, says Trump, we must expand efforts to detain and deport illegal aliens in America's largest cities, such as Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, where millions upon millions of illegal aliens reside. He says these and other such cities are the core of the Democrat power center, where they use illegal aliens to expand their voter base, cheat in elections, and grow the welfare state, robbing good-paying jobs and benefits from hardworking American citizens. These radical left Democrats are sick of mind, hate our country, and actually want to destroy our inner cities, and they're doing a good job of it. There's something wrong with them. That is why they believe in open borders, transgender for everybody, and men playing in women's sports. And that is why I want ICE, Border Patrol, and our great and patriotic law enforcement officers to focus on our crime-ridden and deadly inner cities and those places where sanctuary cities play such a big role, et cetera, et cetera. So he's very openly saying this, that the reason he is deploying ICE agents into blue cities, liberal cities, progressive cities, immigrant-heavy cities, is to take aim at his political opponents. It's not about, oh, you've broken the law, etc.
He's saying the quiet part out loud.
And I should also add that when Senator Alex Padilla, California Senator Alex Padilla, was tackled and arrested when he spoke at the press conference where Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was speaking, what she said right before he spoke was that we are going to, she was supposedly talking about the ICE raids, and suddenly it all went political. She said, we want to liberate, and I'm paraphrasing here because I need the actual quote, but she used the word liberate our cities from Democrats. I mean, that's a coup. That's like a sitting government saying that we are going to use government resources to undermine our opposition political party with force, using violence. It's just really clear, really obvious, really open. And that should have been headline news at the New York Times and CNN. They should have led with that. They're not, because they're part of the problem.
I also want to just, not that it's the most important fact, but I do think it's worth pointing out that Alex Padilla is well known as quiet, soft-spoken, slow-talking. On Capitol Hill, many call him, very smart, but, quote, kind and nerdy. He, quote, never raises his voice. Literally, the Los Angeles Times, whenever he was running, called him a quiet, potent force, etc.
He's not particularly radical at all.
He's not. He's a liberal. Again, he's a good-hearted liberal. And when you see goons roughing up a U.S. senator, when you see the forces, U.S. Marines deployed against the American people, look, I got to say, again, you covered me when I was a Green managing the Stein-Baraka campaign. I'm no apologist for the Democratic Party, but we have to be clear. The MAGA movement is a fascist movement. And I want to, Sonali, I'm inviting you, if you think I'm going too far with the evidence as the investigative journalist you are, I welcome you to pull me back or help me see it differently. But I see brown shirts and I see fascism actually taking hold in this country.
Yeah, because, they're claiming that this is about law and order, even though immigration violations are civil, and they're not. And, the reason why ICE agents aren't actually arresting people with warrants in hand is because they can't get warrants. An actual warrant has to be, in order to be properly legally arrested by a federal agent, that person needs to have a warrant signed by a judge. And ICE doesn't have that in hand when they're going up and going around rounding people up, right? How are they identifying who's undocumented or not? by visually assessing them equals racial profiling. They're literally picking up brown people who they think might be undocumented without warrants and grabbing them, arresting them. And if they determine that they are undocumented, putting them in detention, sometimes not, sometimes keeping in detention citizens or people who have legal status, and sometimes letting them go. And so this is absolutely, and then the people who are ordering them are saying that this is a political act meant to undermine their political opposition. So put those two things together, and absolutely, that is the classic definition of a fascist authoritarianism. And we are here. It's no longer that we're sliding into fascism. It is here. It's here.
Thank you. And I gotta say, Sonali, for folks who've known me for a long time, I used to be one who would criticize people when they just casually talked about fascism. They'd talk about their racist uncle, right, and call him a fascist, or even if an individual police beats up a black or brown person, as horrific as that and racist as that is, it's not fascism. And I would criticize people. Don't toss that word around. It's a very powerful word with a very distinct definition. And because it doesn't mean individual acts, it's a system of how to organize the entire society. And it takes a mass movement for it to happen. Now, you don't need a majority, but you need a big enough mass movement. And that's where the brown shirts come in, y'all. Like the word brown shirt that you've heard both Sonali and myself mention also has a definition. The brown shirt, this is the non-sanctioned state, or they are sanctioned by the state, but they're not an actual arm of the police or the military or the state. They're allowed and encouraged to act in horrific ways. This is the point. Fascism requires a mass movement. It is a way to organize society. And at the end of the day, thank you, Kakistocracy. Just doing my job didn't work at Nuremberg. It's not going to work here as well. But here's my point, Sonali.
They're basically, it's a paramilitary operation is the definition of what they are. And it goes back, as many of these things do, to Nazi Germany. And I want to also remind people that ICE did not exist like 25 years ago, right? ICE was created in the wake of the September 11th, 2001 attacks as part of the USA Patriot Act and this establishment of the Department of Homeland Security, which in and of itself is an Orwellianly named department. This goes back to George W. Bush. And so these are goons who just who are in a department and who are part of a force that didn't exist, they haven't existed for very long, and used to only have jurisdiction around the border, but their jurisdiction kept getting expanded to hundreds of miles outside of the border. So basically, they can now operate in any part of the country. The other really important thing that is important to mention in all of this is that Trump is very purposefully not going after agriculture as much as he had promised he would. He's gone after it a little bit, and the agricultural industry is really terrified, saying, if you go after farm workers, there will be no produce in this. Like we will
starve to death.
Forget about
literally starve to death without.
Forget about like expensive bacon and eggs. That was his big thing about bacon. And there will be nobody wants to do those jobs. And the undocumented, vulnerable farm workers that are out there are the ones keeping food on our table. And the agricultural industry has lobbied Trump. And so I think there was like one or two smaller raids around farm workers. And he's by and large pulled back from that, which again proves this is not about breaking the law, as a lot of supporters will troll people on social media saying, well, they shouldn't have broken the law then. It isn't about breaking the law. It's about political retribution, because if
This
people are breaking the law, they would go after the farm workers too. We don't want them to, but they would. And they're specifically not doing it. They're going after people, creating a situation where it's going to be, if you're an undocumented person, you're safer and better off picking lettuce in the fields and keeping your head down and putting food on our table and not asking for your rights or being able to be in a union or get citizenship. And better off doing that than trying to be like an entrepreneur in a city, or going to college. I wrote an essay a few weeks ago about how Trump wants to remake the United States in the image of the country that I was born and raised in, which is the United Arab Emirates, which is, I'm of Indian descent, born and raised in the UAE. They don't give you citizenship for being born there. So there's no birthright citizenship. He loves that. If you want to be an immigrant, you're welcome to be an immigrant if you can pay a ton of money. And so they have something called the Golden Visa in Dubai. Trump has come up with a gold card, which is like the equivalent of the green card if you pay like millions of dollars. He wants immigrants, the secret police in Dubai, who can overhear your conversations that are anti-monarchy, round you up, deport you instantly. And all the workers who are immigrant labor are living in absolute subjugation because they are the backbone of the economy. I'm convinced that Trump wants to remake the United States in the image of countries like the UAE. He loves the UAE. They did this big cryptocurrency deal with him. He's gone on and on about how much he loves that country. That's what he wants. That's the future of the US if we don't fight back. And I left that country because of what it was. And I don't want that to happen here.
Like you just said so very much, right? So I do want to take a moment, Sonali, to sort of go back to fascism itself, because I have real clarity. And that is that fascism is not merely jackbooted thugs. It's not even merely militarism, although that is, and nationalism is a very explicit part of it. But it's important to acknowledge that the worldview that they have is an us versus them, right? And that's why in Modi, you have a brown-skinned fascist in India. In Bolsonaro, like you have black and brown-skinned fascists. In the US, it's always white supremacy because of the ethno-state notion of it, right? But the thing is, what the fascist move when a system is in decay, and just as the 1930s fascism emerged in Europe, because the entire world was shifting from an agrarian society to an industrial one, and the working class did not know where they fit in, and things are chaotic, and there is a understandable concern, right? The fascists have a story to say the problem is the other, the problem is the them, but you are the us. We are together, and it's a hyper-nationalist view. It's always anti-immigrant, no matter where you are. It is always hyper-nationalist. It is always militaristic. It is always hyper-masculine and patriarchal, right? So in this country, it looks like white supremacy. But in other countries, the them is whoever is not from that area, right? So this is really important to recognize that what fascism is and what we're seeing, because, and I'm just going to lay it out, Sonali, my read is that because of automation, robotics, technology, artificial intelligence, the entire political economy is shifting. The global ecological collapse has begun. And what we're seeing is an absolute fear of what is happening, what is going to happen. And as horrific as fascism is, like Trump has a narrative that people are falling for. And I take it as my job as a white redneck to go into pool halls and bowling alleys and say, these fuckers are not our friends. They have the boot on our neck. And we've got more in common with immigrants and people of color and transgendered people than we do with these big bosses who have a plan for us, right? So I'm going to invite you, Sonali, to just react to what you heard from me and help me if I'm getting it wrong.
No, I think you're spot on. One of the things that I remember thinking about last year was when Trump would have, his big rallies. It was like, I think it was the Madison Square Garden rally. And I remember interviewing one of, longtime colleague and good friend of mine, a journalist, Arun Gupta, who attended that rally. And one of the things he pointed out was that he went to the rally sort of expecting hate fest, and actually what he found was a love fest. It was weird. Trump was referring in very loving terms, excuse me, to his base. And they were feeling the love. There was this like strong sense of like that they wanted to, just have this kind of strong relationship with one another. Hang on, I'm about to have a coughing fit.
Take care of yourself, Sonali.
And yes, I'm drinking out of a giant vase. Stay hydrated, folks. But yeah, so there was this sense of like, church. It was church, right? It was giving people a sense of community. And to me, that was an indictment of Democrats and liberals, because people are feeling abandoned by the Liberal Party. They're feeling abandoned by Democrats.
Because they have been abandoned, Sonali. Like, that's the thing that we have to say. Like, the reality is that the Democratic Party liberal leadership, that the neoliberals and their worship of private property and the market itself in this moment, at a time when we could literally be living in paradise, there's enough to go around if we democratized technology and know-how. Like there's so much surplus now. There's so much value created. All we have to do is share it. Literally, all we have to do is fucking share. And like they would rather hoard money and power and let fascists win than work with socialists. That's the reality.
This to me like goes very much hand in hand with work that I've been doing around abolition, which if you don't mind, I'd love to bring up. Like I published a book in January of this year. It came out by Seven Stories Press called Talking About Abolition, a Police-Free World is Possible. And abolition has often been seen as the purview of like Black Lives Matter, this narrow demand to abolish police, defund the police, etc. And actually, it offers a beautiful alternative vision for the world that we want, right? We know what we're against, and the left is really good at articulating what we're against, not so good as at articulating what it is that we're for, and the beautiful world that lies just on the other side of abolition that's available for us, where we can all thrive, where everybody, not just communities of color, but white people and straight people and LGBTQ folks and immigrants can thrive. And the idea behind abolition is simply diverting funds away from state forces of power, state agents of power, because it's very expensive to send ICE agents out. It's very expensive to run armed police. It's very expensive to keep a US military. And those agents of force suck up so many of our resources with the excuse that they're there to keep us safe. And it turns out that, of course, they're a downstream solution and one that doesn't work, because usually they come in after we've been harmed, and then they tend to harm us more. And the thing that is actually harming us is poverty, because poverty is violence. And how do we address that? By simply diverting our resources from those agents of force and into the things that really keep us safe: housing, shelter, food, education, job training, libraries, after school programs, healthcare, right? All of those things that we are told we can't afford. And then when the biggest driver of crime is inequality. And so if you actually want an upstream solution to crime, you reduce inequality, and you reduce inequality by defunding the police, defunding ICE, defunding the US military, and refunding those things that actually truly keep us safe. That is the abolitionist vision. That is what we need in this moment. And I think the more we articulate that, the better. I'm very happy to see people equating ICE with police, because initially, like people like Mayor Karen Bass were all like, LAPD is keeping us safe and not going to cooperate with ICE. No, they are part of the problem. They are cooperating fully with ICE. They are helping ICE do their jobs. I believe it was ProPublica just put out a great report showing all the times when police have cooperated with and enabled ICE. They are one and the same. They just have a slightly different boss. So I would like to put out an abolitionist worldview, really look into what it is and how it can really benefit us all.
So I'm going to do this. I just say, when people ask me, oh no, we need the police. Like, what would the world look like if we didn't have police? Imagining that, oh, it'll be something terrible. And my answer is always, it will look like an affluent neighborhood. I want you to think about the most affluent neighborhood where there are not police presence. That's actually what it would look like, right? So,
Exactly.
Sonali, our time has just flown by. I know you have yet another interview lined up immediately after this. So I do want to give you an opportunity for any closing words with a loving chastisement. You did not make a pitch for your subscription service, and I'm going to ask you to do that in your closing words.
I will. So I do solutions journalism for social justice. It's what I learned at Yes Media. I'm so grateful for the 4 years I was at Yes, and with Yes shutting down, because sadly our left journalism is defunded and struggling. Journalists are out of work. And instead of me trying to just find another job, I have decided to take my show independent, or as David was reminding me at the top of this hour, interdependent, because really I'm depending on people all over the country who care about media and who want to get independent sources of information to subscribe to the show. It's very easy to feel depressed reading the news these days. And I know so many people who are well-meaning, who are tuning out because there's just so much doom and gloom. And, you know, the whole adage of if it bleeds, it leads is fueling disengagement, which is bad for our democracy. I'm trying to do the opposite. We all know that, you know, think that we are screwed. We all know. We don't need to know yet more details about how we're screwed. I can leave that to the journalists with funding. What I do is solutions journalism. Instead of focusing on the problems of society, I focus on the solutions to those problems and how people are enacting those solutions. And so I just need 2,000 people. I'm starting out with actually 1,000 by the end of this year to sign up for $4 a month. I've purposely kept the paywall super, super cheap, $4 a month, pennies a day. You wouldn't even miss it. To sign up to my website, risingupwithsonali.com, and to support it, because when you subscribe, you get access to everybody gets access to the audio content, and the podcast is free. But if you want access to the video content, the transcripts of all the interviews, you can get that for $4 a month. There are higher levels as well. But if you're, if you can't afford more than $4 a month, I will be so grateful to have 4 a month. And if I can just get up to 1,000 by the end of this year, I will be able to keep doing what I'm doing. And it's just me. I'm a one-woman show, from booking the interviews to researching, writing my scripts, functioning my teleprompter, rolling B-roll, live video production, editing, mixing, uploading, social media promotion, newsletter, maintaining my membership list, field reports. Is me. It's me, an immigrant who came to the US on an F1 visa in 1991, wanting to study physics and astronomy, and quit my job at Caltech so that I could be a social justice journalist and do something really meaningful in my life. I am a lean, mean machine because I've had many years of experience being super efficient. And so you really get your money's worth for $4 a month. Come on, you can do it. Sign up for social justice journalism at risingupwithsonali.com.
That's the best damn pitch I think I've heard in months. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Sonali, I know you've got to jump to yet another interview. I just want to say again, thank you so much for coming onto this program. I hope you'll come back.
I would love that. Thank you so much, David, Shane, and to all your viewers. I really appreciate it.
Bye now. Well, I told you, Shane, Sonali was going to bring it.
Yeah, and boy, did she. I'm still going through half of what she was saying in my head and going to have to replay that for the rest of the night.
Well, luckily, I want to remind y'all that subscribe at Redneck Gone Green, and you'll get at least one of her essays. And we, too, make our material available for free. We are on the Democracy at Work platform. And Shane, as we always do, remember, Redneck Gone Green with Shane and I are an independent program. It's like Shane and I are responsible for everything that you see or hear here, with the exception of Tracking the Crisis, which Mel Figueroa creates through the Democracy Collaborative, which is a segment we do. But the point is, we are responsible for this program. But we have the great honor of being on the Democracy at Work platform. And so, Shane, I'm going to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the Democracy at Work larger platform and what's going on there.
Yeah, David, it's I've said this before lots of times on the show, but to remind everyone, Redneck Gone Green is a part of a new program that we are bringing to Democracy at Work called the Friends of Democracy at Work. Pretty simple. We're basically doing platform sharing. We're trying to reach as many people with as many quality ideas that are going to affect people. I'm getting a phone call. There we go. Yeah, trying to get as many organizations and like-minded individuals, groups together to be able to present their ideas and ways in which people can get involved in all of this crazy chaos that we're having to live in a variety of different ways across our platform, whether it's through our YouTube channel, which has over 500, I think, almost 560,000 subscribers right now. And also our Substack channel is growing. Check it out. We got a lot of new programming coming this summer. We're going to be taking some things offline, bringing some new things on. And like Sonali was saying too, she's not alone in the whole, we're doing this for nothing. And we rely on support from viewers and subscribers all across the platform. So like Dave was saying, if you can help us out, help her out. We all need a little help from time to time.
The problem is in capitalism, Shane, they locked up the food, right? If we were in fact sharing, we'd be able to get it. We wouldn't need to be actually making pitches like this. But until the meantime, we're just asking if you're able to help us out, help Sonali out. And in the spirit of what Shane was talking about, the Democracy at Work platform, I'm really excited to share with y'all that next week, June 23rd, we are going to have a special guest. Harriet Fraud is a psychotherapist, an unapologetic Marxist, and she also has a program on Democracy at Work called Capitalism Hits Home. Her latest piece that I saw is called How Economic Transformations Impact America's Mental Health. So I'm hoping that we talk about that, and I'm sure we will, and more. So next week, Harriet Fraud from Capitalism Hits Home. Shane, any final words from you?
No, man, just take care.
hey, and as the youth has taught me to say, Shane, can't stop, won't stop.
Won't stop.
Good night, y'all.
Take care, y'all.